I'm Jack Gillmar. I was born here in 1943, and grew up during that period of when the World War II was on. And I've lived here all my life, except for 10 years living on the mainland for college and studies and travel. So I have a good sense of Honolulu going back to probably the late 1920s, because Honolulu did not change from 1929 until about 1950 or so. And that was because of the Depression, and then because of the war. And so everything was pretty much frozen in a time warp during that period. So you could consider my memory as really going back to the 1920s. Well, 4th Street Mall was very clearly the very center of town. It's where all the good shopping was, where the buses sort of stopped, both on King Street and on Hotel Street, and to some extent Beretania. But mostly the action was between Fort and King, and that was the major shopping area. In fact, well, that was, let's put it that way, it was sort of the high-class shopping part of Honolulu. Chinatown was very much the more budget area and produce area, and it was a very vibrant scene. Both Chinatown and 4th Street were vibrant shopping locations. Upper 4th Street from Hotel Street to Beretania was a bit more, say, middle-class shopping, smaller shops, and then it was anchored across where Kukui Plaza is today. There used to be the Princess Theater up there, and so that was sort of an anchor at the end of 4th Street. Doesn't exist anymore. 4th Street now just pretty much stops at Beretania. And there are a number of obviously fabulous buildings along there, old buildings, that really marked Honolulu. Unfortunately, in the major shopping center between Fort and King, between Honolulu and King Street, all of those major shopping buildings are gone. So you don't really have a flavor of that very important section anymore. The flavor is really north of Hotel Street now. Well, Ala Moana Center just sucked the life out of town. It was unbelievable. I mean, I remember when Ala Moana opened, and very shortly thereafter, all the action moved there because parking became increasingly difficult downtown. You have to understand that most people did not have cars during the 20s and 30s and 40s, and travel by bus was very much accepted. We had trolley buses that had wonderful leather seats. I mean, they were very comfortable, and they were quiet, and almost everybody rode them. And the introduction of the smelly diesel buses, not so pleasant. Plastic seats, not so good. So everybody starts buying their cars, and then they can't park. And Hotel Street was two-way street with parking on both sides, and it was very congested, and the sidewalks were congested. You thought maybe you could see that in New York today, that kind of a congested situation. But if you couldn't park, you couldn't shop, and if you didn't want to ride the bus, then Ala Moana was where it was at. It's definitely neither here nor there, and it's unfortunate. And part of it has to do with the Chinatown, the running down of Chinatown, and unfortunately the invasion of homeless people into Chinatown, which has compromised a lot of that very interesting area, vibrant area. But the area between, say, Nu'uanu and 4th Street could very easily, not so easily, but very profitably, I think, be renewed. There are some buildings there that are very worthwhile saving. and adaptive reusing, and there are some that are just sort not economic, that need to be consolidated and turned into residential high-rises to get people back living in that area. There are people living north of Beretania Street, but they don't venture south of Beretania because the area is not developed enough.